we want to welcome you today to our Principles of Journalism class, MC 160. And we've got a nice crowd in here just for everybody at home who wants to see. There you go. We do a little spin turn. We get in the back. It's a great day today as we're going to have an interesting discussion today. In our Principles of Journalism class, we talk a lot about the First Amendment and about the importance of journalism to a free society and to democracy. In fact, Thomas Jefferson once said, were I to have to choose between a free government and no press or a free press and no government, I would choose the latter. He said we need the press as much as or more than we need the actual government to make sure that our people in a democratic society can do their duty. Sometimes, though, that runs afoul of what's going on. Our guest today has been an example of what happens when those things run afoul. The Marion County Record has been published since 1869, Eric just told me, so about as old as K-State. And on August 11th, had a rather rude knock at the door, so to speak, and with a warrant from a police chief and a judge that ended up being not as legal as they had hoped it would be. There was a search, there was a seizure. All that has now been returned. And joining us today to talk about that, as well as the First Amendment and papers in all across the United States, particularly small town papers, is Eric Meyer, the owner, publisher, editor of the Marion County Record. Everyone, please, a round of applause for Eric.
Thanks.
So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We certainly appreciate it. And, it's interesting, the circumstances that bring us together, and we've seen the national story. Why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown of, from your perspective, of the events of August 11th and kind of what has happened since?
It's a long story that actually starts well before August 11th, but I'll keep it simple. Really, there was a coordinated raid on 3 locations, and one of the forgotten ones was not a journalist, but a politician in town who was raided, and all of the law enforcement officers in the county were involved in this raid. So if you wanted to commit another crime somewhere, you could have done it.
That was the time.
It was sort of a coordinated raid that everyone came in at the same time using encrypted radio. I mean, we felt like we were the Medellin drug cartel or something here. They came in, they made us wait for in a long time for close to 3 hours. They threw the staff out of the newspaper office. They did not throw my mother out of her house, which they would have had a lot of trouble if they tried. And then they also made Vice Mayor Ruth Herbel wait as well. What had happened was we'd gotten a document about a week earlier, and we actually told the police we got it, that we thought that was explaining how a local restaurateur didn't really have a valid license because of an old DUI. And it turned out we did some checking to make sure that it was a valid document because we didn't want to get Dan Rathered
and pulled away
and found that we were based off something that was a fake document. So we tracked down that it was a legit document, and then decided afterward that this was just a shooting back and forth in a divorce battle, that her estranged husband thought he wanted all the cars because she didn't really have a valid driver's license and hadn't for 15 years. And anyway, we said we aren't interested in this story, so we're not using it. The vice mayor had gotten from the same source the same document, and it turned out that the restaurateur was applying for a liquor license, and she wanted to have the police investigate it. So it turns out on the Friday before, a week before the raid, both the vice mayor and we notified the police that we had come into possession of this document, and that in our case, we weren't going to do anything about it. In her case, she was turning it over to the police. City administrator said, nah, we'll let the state worry about this. So it was dead as far as we could hear. That Monday.
So, but why did you report it to the authorities? What was that made you, I don't know, nervous about it, or at least suspect?
For one thing, we thought we were getting set up. But second, there was an allegation. The person who gave it to us had a lot of connections with law enforcement, and she'd originally said, I got this because of my connections. Well, that would have been improper if she'd taken something out of a police station. And also she made an allegation that this woman had been driving for 14 years and the police were fully aware of it and would do nothing about it. So I forwarded it along to the police, and turns out she was right. We've got anonymous sources on the police department who said that they had known about it and weren't arresting this woman because, among other things, well, they used the B word to describe her. But she also ran a Facebook site that was devoted to crime and oftentimes would criticize law enforcement or praise law enforcement. So she had some role in this. This is a very long and complicated story. She's a very excitable person, sort of a Facebook troll. And somewhere along the line, the police notified her of all this. She became angry. She went to a city council meeting. She had a fit about it. This goes back even the week before that, when she had us thrown out of a meeting with Congressman LaTurner at her restaurant. And so we'd run a story about that. That's how we got the material from the source. The source was mad about that, about her throwing us out, and so on and so forth. Anyway, she accused us at the city council meeting of breaking into her computer, stealing her identity, committing all these crimes. She was told by the police, she didn't go to the police. The police went to her and said, "You've been the victim of a crime." She got mad about it. She went to the city council. She told a whole bunch of stories. I talked to her afterward. She said, "Oh, I know you didn't steal it. I know who it came from. It came from my ex-husband, who gave it to a woman by the name of Pam Mogg, who actually was our source." She later told us that it was okay to tell her that. So she knew, but she created a fuss about it and said she was trying to get the vice mayor because she didn't like her. Well, we thought everything had died down. We reported all this. And Friday of that week, at about 10 till 11, we got this coordinated raid at my mother's house. I was staying with my 98-year-old mother. And actually, I was getting ready to fix her dinner. She had Meals on Wheels coming. I usually popped it in the microwave for her. And the newspaper office and the vice mayor's office. They came in, immediately took my cell phone, my laptop, guarded the desktop in the house so that nobody could use it. I wanted to call our lawyer, and I said, "His number's on my phone." I mean, I also have it on the computer. And I said, "Well, I've also got it posted on the wall down in my office." Well, they wouldn't let us in the office. So I had to go to a neighbor of the newspaper and say, "Can I look up on your iPad what the phone number of Max Couch is?" He's the media lawyer for the State Press Association. And then I asked him to use his phone, found out it was an old flip phone. And but it worked. I called Max, and Max got everything started at that point. But they took out of our office not only the computer that the reporter had used to verify the document we received, but our file server, my computer, the computer of another reporter who, in fact, hadn't even been there that week that they were doing it. Her father had died the week earlier, and she was sick and on vacation and some other things. And then they took all the stuff from my mother's house. They took the stuff from Ruth Herbel, the vice mayor's house, and took them away. And it took them a long time to do it. Immediately, and this was, one of the testaments to the value of calling Max, and he called the State Press Association. They called the Kansas Reflector. The Kansas Reflector was able to publish, which we weren't, and they got something out. And by an hour into this thing, it was hitting full stream. It then was a lengthy battle to figure out what had happened. We immediately, for those of you who don't know how to cover news, a search warrant is issued after a probable cause affidavit. They have to say that there's a reason why they're going to search that. And the probable cause affidavit is filed with the court, and then the court issues a search warrant. We went over to the court and asked for the probable cause affidavit. They said it didn't exist.
Which would make it illegal.
Yeah, it eventually existed 3 days later. They filed it 3 days later. And it was kind of odd because the probable cause affidavit's supposed to be notarized. It wasn't notarized. The judge had notarized it. And judges are allowed to do that. They're attorneys. They can notarize something, but
a little out of their purvey normally.
It's a little different.
To notarize and serve the same warrant is
normally the county attorney, the prosecutor, a district attorney in some places, county attorney in others, will approve this in advance. We are still unclear whether the county attorney approved this in advance or not. County attorney says he didn't see it until 3 days later. The police chief says he approved it in advance. County attorney said when he saw it 3 days later, he immediately knew it was wrong and we shouldn't have done it. But it took him 2 more days after that before he actually announced that. And that was after he got a call from the KBI. So
Kansas Bureau of Investigation for those.
yeah, the
from out of state.
KBI, we immediately contacted an attorney and it took a little while to do that because various attorneys we tried to reach had conflicts and other things, but we found a really good one in Kansas City, Bernie Rhodes. And Bernie immediately contacted Mativi, the director of the KBI, who I believe was on vacation and I believe cut his vacation short to come back to the office and had all of his people come in and look at the case this was on Monday that he contacted him. On Tuesday. He also issued orders, basically can't really order, but he encouraged the law enforcement officers to leave all this stuff in a locker and don't look at it. And we are led to believe that that actually happened. And then he was going to announce on Wednesday what was going to happen. And on Wednesday, that's when mysteriously the county attorney suddenly decided that the search warrant, we really never should have had it in the first place. We're going to abandon it and we're going to return all the property. And the deal was, and this only makes difference to people in the business, we were supposed to get the announcement of that first, and then they would announce it from KBI headquarters in Topeka. And the county attorney was supposed to hand deliver it to us. He never did.
So this is it seems a pretty cut and dried, First Amendment issue, right? I mean, we talk about the First Amendment. We have our 5 rights of the First Amendment. One of those, the Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of the press. And essentially that means they can't, not only can they not make laws, they can't use laws against it in an unconstitutional way. And in this case, this was procedurally, obviously all over the place, and very thin in the fact that you actually, as we find out later, it was obtained legally and there was no problem, right?
So the way we verified the document was we asked her how she got it, and our reporter, who can barely, send a Facebook message, couldn't figure it out. So she called the State Department of Revenue and asked them, how do I find this information on the web? And they said, well, you go to this public site and you do this, 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 and this. And she said, so it's okay for me to do that? Yeah, it's okay for you to do it. They later announced that it was perfectly okay to do it as well. So we did nothing illegal. And there's some just very peculiar things about the search. For one, why would you search the vice mayor who'd already given this document to them? They knew she had it. There was absolutely no reason. A couple of Kansas City TV stations have taken that search warrant application to judges and said, would you approve this? And they said, well, there's nothing they're searching for. Why are they searching the vice mayor? They already had it. The document that we obtained from the source was sitting, my desk sits here, my computer's here, my desk's here. The document was right here within reach. My computer was right here within reach. Didn't take it. The police chief didn't bring his reading glasses. When he was reading the rights to one of the reporters, he had to have another officer do it because he couldn't read it. Well, if he's looking for evidence, you'd kind of think you'd bring your reading glasses.
Now, tell a little background here of the police chief and the judge and some of the questions that you had upon his installation and some of the things that maybe had been investigating and why maybe this could have been, you say you thought you were being set up at first. Why did you feel that way? And what kind of acts could there have been to grind?
Well, but before I get to that, let me just also say that the source who gave the document to us, Vice Mayor Herbal had identified that source. They didn't search her house. They, in fact, didn't ask her a question. Not one question. And I had sent this note saying, we had all this. If you have any questions, if you think there's a crime, let us know. We'll try to cooperate with you. They didn't ask us a question. This was all set up and maybe an unholy alliance of 2 different forces. We haven't been able to prove some of this, so we haven't printed it. But we have printed the fact that the police chief was coming from Kansas City, which is kind of odd. I mean, why would you go from Kansas City, Missouri, to Marion, Kansas? Go from $110,000 a year job to a $60,000 a year job 1 year before you were supposed to get retirement. Well, it turns out he was about to be demoted. He denied that when we found out about it before his job, threatened to sue us if we ran it. He has later admitted it because enough people have come forward and saying it.
And it's the truth.
And it is the truth. But the Kansas City police have got some problems of their own about keeping records straight. But he was accused of a lot of sexual impropriety, of running over a dead body, just creating a hostile work environment. When it was announced that he was becoming the police chief, we were inundated from phone calls from people he'd formerly worked with. Unfortunately, if you deal with police, this is one of the things that they don't like to ever be named, because they're afraid that they're going to be in a dark alley with their partner someday, and the partner's going to say, "You're a rat," and whatever else you see on
Watch too many movies, right?
Whatever. So they wouldn't go on the record, and we couldn't run the story without some verification. And KCPD is known for not always putting into its files all the things that have happened. And actually some Kansas City reporters are working on that as a story right now. None of his suspensions ever made it to the C-post record, which is where law enforcement suspensions are supposed to be recorded. They did happen, they just never got reported. So there wasn't a paper trail for us to follow. So he didn't like us. But the real thing that's kind of interesting is the city administrator had decided this is not anything we're going to pursue. City administrator is in charge of the police chief. Somehow the mayor got involved in this, and the mayor met with the police chief and talked about this. Now, you have to understand the mayor and the vice mayor detest each other. They are political opponents. The mayor tried to have the vice mayor recalled this past January. He didn't get enough signatures on the petition. The grounds for the recall was that she violated the Kansas Open Meetings Act because she had accidentally hit reply all to a note the city administrator had sent out saying, "I've posted the new packet of information," and her message was, "Thanks." So there's very bad blood that's gone on for a long time between them and the newspaper as well. So why, after the guy who got the document was, and he admits it, Ryan Newell, her estranged husband, gave it to Pam Mogg, a friend of the couple who kind of, once they split up, she became friends with Ryan instead of with Carrie. She gave it to us, and they were never even talked to or interviewed. But all of a sudden, Ruth Herbel, who had nothing to do with it, and the newspaper were the topic of a search. And we know the mayor was discussing this with the police chief. So we thought that the mayor and police chief, and as I say, I'm not printing this, so this is not an allegation at this point that I can prove, but my suspicion is that they said, we can get them both at the same time, because the vice mayor's up for re-election. The mayor is not, he's retiring. So it was a good time to try to go after us, and they did.
Let's talk about the temperature of the country, of kind of the area on how the media is viewed, and what kind of relationships we're seeing, and how, as someone who's been running the newspaper, you've been running that newspaper how long?
I've only been running it. I'm kind of weird because I normally was you.
Right.
I spent 26 years teaching journalism at the University of Illinois after a career as a working journalist for about 20 years at the Milwaukee Journal. So this is my retirement gig. This is my retirement hobby. I don't even take a salary at this newspaper. So this is unprecedented. I mean, we've never seen this happen. The last time it happened was a newsroom raid, I believe, was in the 1980s at a student newspaper, the Stanford Daily. Oh, yeah. And they changed the federal law at that time after that, because they lost their court case and said it was okay to search a newsroom. But there was a federal law put in after that that said that instead of search warrants, it's preferred that you subpoena the newspaper if you think they've got something, which allows you to have a hearing rather than having the police just go rifle through everything that's on everybody's desk. And you should see all the stuff they rifled through. We're just getting back the photos that they took. They were allowed to photograph basically everything they saw. And they photographed my bank statement, my personal bank statement. Nice. Why? It was sitting on my mother's, next to my mother's computer. And it's one of the things my mother was objecting to in some video that I think some of you have seen and we've got here today.
Yeah.
But the response has been phenomenal. Our press run before this was 4,000 copies. We've received more than 5,000 subscription orders since then.
Wow. Now, did you have the front page here after?
I do have the front,
And
I do have
so
some front
all of
pages.
this happened. You were able to get a paper out the very next week.
Yeah, without the first thing I set off to do was we grabbed some old computers we junked, some old Windows XP computers.
XP. Good stuff.
And
That's
wired
older
them
than
up,
most of the folks in this room. You know that, right?
made a temporary server out of it so that we could share that. We didn't have, this is our front page.
All right, here we go.
We didn't have our nameplate.
Oh, wow. So here, let's put it up. We'll show the folks at home. Oh, gosh, we've got it, and it's reversed. Oh, well, you'll have to look at that reversed. I'm sorry, folks. As you can see, yes. So there you go.
So we didn't have anything. We didn't have any of our logs. We didn't know what ads were supposed to be in the paper. We actually forgot a half-page ad in that paper.
You can do a make good. You'll be all right.
Yeah, and it the next week.
That's fantastic. Well, we do have some video, as you said, from. I mean, these are just your basic closed circuit, your closed circuit TVs, and
yeah, these are security cameras.
Security cams. Let's go ahead, Colleen. Let's see. Yeah, so we're gonna show you this one here. Start with the top one and that one right there. So tell us a little bit about this here.
This is part of our. You can maximize it over at the right.
It's a cryptic little key, so I'm guessing that's the password.
That's the police chief.
Oh, man.
That's his only officer.
The one who remembered his glasses.
Some of
No,
which.
I mean,
Have they really? Have we seen an attrition there?
Yeah.
I just-
Before.
I was pretty sure passwords were on the list.
Deb was gone at the time. They're taking her computer away. Our people had been thrown out at that point, so that they had to go back in another. They were sitting in the parking lot. It was 100 and some odd degrees that day. But they come around, they do this. We've also got them another one reading the rights to a reporter that's brought back.
Yeah, Eric's the password protected, Jack.
Okay.
Go ahead and jump forward a little bit, Colleen, there, and we'll.
That's a deputy sheriff who came as well.
That is. You're gonna go?
Taking pictures of everything.
Because they know something bad on here, I would break the window and take it out. That's me.
All right, I'll pull around front.
I'll talk shit behind the Jeep's back. I'm not doing it to the face. Come on, now that's ready. Eric's is ready. This one's ready. Yep. Like unplugged, ready. Okay.
Four-star general.
Flash drive. You going with it?
That's our file server, and they took it. They also disabled our network. They took at my mother's house her computer router. I have no idea why they wanted the router, but they're photographing everything and trying to figure out how to unplug it, taking stuff away. That just goes on.
Let's go to the interior of the house.
Yeah, go to the other video if you want.
Colleen, if you don't mind. Thank you. Colleen Lind, our
This was
acting
now
director,
at my
running.
mother's house.
Doom
and
jockey?
This was after she'd been, the cops had been standing there. Two of them had been standing there for 2 hours before the rest of them arrived. They arrived. This is my 98-year-old mother at the left in the walker.
Right? Yes.
Yeah, go ahead and roll it.
She was trying to call me.
Don't you touch any of that stuff.
Ma'am.
This is my house.
You're wasting your breath.
Ma'am,
Would get out of
And
here.
you asshole.
we'll be out of here.
Get them out of here. They're here.
That's my cell phone ringing that's in police custody.
Your mother loves you. You love your mother. You're an asshole. Police chief. You're the chief. Oh, God. Get out of my house. You're patrol. Get out. Stand outside. You can stand outside that door and still see him. I don't want you in my house. I don't want you. You do not take that. What?
That's a business class router, has no light.
What?
Leave a message after.
Is there another one downstairs, another computer?
Thank you.
We never went down there and he stayed up here the whole time.
Well, that was yeah. What's he doing over there going through the papers?
How many computers
For
do you
my
have?
bank statement.
I'm not going to tell you. Get out of my way.
It's all right.
I want to see what they're doing.
Well, they're working.
Backing him with the walker. Love it.
What,
You can go on through if you want.
what are you doing? Those are personal papers.
Man, those aren't papers, they're electronic devices, which is what the judge said that we're supposed to take. Okay?
You people.
Anyway, the sad part of this is that after this raid, she was very disconsolate. She would not eat. She would not sleep. She finally went to bed at about 7 a.m. the following Saturday. She woke up at around 1 o'clock, and I said, "Well, do you want some breakfast?" And she said, "I don't know. I'm not feeling very well. I'm not sure that I can," and died in the middle of a sentence. So, she did not have heart trouble. She was fairly, you can tell from listening to her, she was fairly opinionated. She was not demented. She was still working for the newspaper, as a matter of fact. She produced, well, it's on page 5 each week. There's a column called Memories that she wrote. There's her byline. That was her last byline in the paper, that she had gathered all this stuff from old files and produced it for us. And she worked a day a week and had done that since I was probably in first grade.
Wow. So she had run that paper for.
She'd been involved.
50, 60,
My father and she ran it for a long time. I got involved because they were getting ready to retire in 1998. And they did not own it. It was owned by the Hoke family. The last of the Hokes died though in the 60s, and my father and mother had been running this paper since then. So for 30 years, they were looking around to say, well, we got to sell it to somebody, and they looked to who was available, who was wanting to buy it. And it was American, which became Liberty, which became Gatehouse, which became Gannett. And we looked at those papers and said, we just don't want that to happen.
Right. No thanks.
And so I went in as a silent partner in half of it with my parents, and he was, I don't know, 74, 75, bought the paper, and then he eventually retired. He passed away. We've had a succession of people trying to run it. I got into it because I was teaching classes like this, and went home on spring break during COVID in 2020, and I got stranded in Kansas. I couldn't go back to Illinois. So I taught my classes Zoom from that newsroom for a year or so, and Zoom classes suck. I didn't.
You can say that as loud as you want, Eric.
I didn't want to do it anymore, and I was old enough I could retire. I just stayed there.
So let's talk about the importance of small town newspaper. I mean, that's one of the things I think that this also points to is we talk about the things that what are the two things that we hold accountable? Power and power and money, right? Those are the journalists hold those people accountable. And when you have a police chief with some questions, when you have a judge who's who's procedurally a little unsound, how important are these local papers and these areas that don't have them, these news deserts, we call them? What is the danger?
Infinite. Really infinite. And as big as this story has been nationally, the story that we're missing locally, and we've been trying to go on to it, is that they prepared a budget for the city of Marion, and the city council never had any role in it. Not at all. They haven't even discussed anything. We believe the mayor did this sort of behind the scenes, and their budget hearing, and if you've ever covered these things, which are boring as all get out, they have a formal hearing that they come in and they say, here's our budget for the year. Anybody have any questions? And they sit there and wait. Taxes are too high. Okay, move to approve the budget, and it's done. It's just a rubber stamp. That's coming up Tuesday. City council, they actually did have a very brief meeting this past Tuesday because we had been forcing it, but they haven't figured out anything. They have departments that, their budget's growing by 30 or 40%, and the council doesn't know why. Nobody's looked at it. And that's the kind of stuff that if there isn't somebody in a newspaper, there isn't somebody asking questions, people are afraid. One of the things about modern society is that I blame it on Barney the dinosaur.
You blame a lot of social ills on Barney, I think.
I love you, you love me. Everything's supposed to be smooth and nice, and nobody ever questions anything. Well, that is fine if everybody has got good motives. It's a wonderful world if everybody is honest, if everybody is true to what they're talking about and really cares about things. But if it's not, it's the type of situation that leads to, an Adolf Hitler or a Vladimir Putin or whatever, where no one is questioning anything. And in our case, if we question something and now we'll try to squash you with the legal apparatus, it's disastrous. And we are sitting, because we decided we didn't want to be part of a chain, we're surrounded by daily newspapers in much larger cities. Salina, McPherson, McNewton, Hutchinson, El Dorado, Augusta, so on and so forth. We have a bigger news staff than any of them. They're down at, I'm told the last editorial person at the Hutchinson News quit the other day. Their editor is in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and works part-time at that. The Newton, McPherson, and Augusta and El Dorado papers have a staff of 2, one of whom used to work for us. He was a good guy. He was a sports writer, and now he's everything. But you can't get to everything. You can't cover everything. And if people start knowing that, and coupled with this idea of everybody staying in their shell, don't get involved, don't make waves. Everybody, we want to be positive. Everything should be positive. Democracy isn't neat. It is not a tidy little system. As Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others, which are so much worse. And it is about people coming forward, and it's about people listening to other people. It's sort of the ultimate, we hear a lot these days about diversity. And so, this is democracy, is diversity. And it's about not only listening to people of different views and different needs, but also speaking up about them and speaking out about them. And to many extents, the newspaper has become the voice for a group of people that are reluctant to speak out on their own. They're afraid, particularly in a small town. You speak out against the mayor, and the mayor gets all his buddies to no longer go to your gas station that you run, and you lose business. There's a guy who runs a lumber yard in town, and we think he'd be a good candidate for mayor. He won't do it because I'll lose business if I go into politics. The political opponents will avoid my business. They won't let me go to the country club. They won't let me go to whatever. Well, I don't take a salary, so I don't care. They cut off the advertising. I don't golf. I don't fish. I don't want to go to the country club. There's not a whole lot they can do to me. But the interesting thing out of all this, and this is sort of, let's be journalists here and do old inverted pyramid and get the most important thing first, is the response we've received. Not just from journalism organizations. We've gotten that, and it's been great. They're wonderful. But from average, ordinary people, particularly people in law enforcement, by the way. We've disproportionately, veteran law enforcement officers are saying what a travesty this is. But it is coming from every point on the political spectrum. I was reading notes the other day, and these were sequentially, back to back. I'll bet those people are all Republicans. And the next one, I'll bet those people are all Democrats. And even the nut jobs on the far right and the far left, they are all united with the people in the middle, with the intellectuals, with the people who are anti-intellectual, all saying that this is one of those fundamental things you don't do. And there aren't very many issues in this world right now that people are united on,
that bring people together like this, right?
Yeah, everything divides us, and that's one of the problems. Is I blame this on social media, I blame this on talking heads on TV, I blame this on a lot of things, but we've gotten to the point where we are debating issues that there are no facts involved in. It's all just opinions, and it's about things that don't really affect you. Social change happens when people hear stories that they can relate to. And if you don't believe it, think about our attitudes toward various social issues. And I don't want to get into what they are particularly because I don't want to be political about this, but people's attitudes have changed once they know that there are human beings involved and what those real human beings are. We've changed our position as a society on same-sex marriage. Now, some people still disagree with it, but by and large, society as a whole, we've changed our opinion by and large on abortion. Although some people disagree with it, there's still generally, and part of that was because people got to know people who were involved in those relationships or who had gone through the tragedy of having an unwanted pregnancy and wanting to deal with it. And those stories came out through newspapers and other publications like that. I've got a story that I'm trying to work on right now that it's a woman who's 4 months pregnant in Marion who has no insurance. Well, it's a great pivot to healthcare and everything else. And if we can tell her story and get people to recognize her as a person, it makes it look a little different. Now, I don't know whether it's going to turn out that way or not. We've got a story 2 weeks later from what we had on this, or next Exodus, yeah, it's 2 weeks later. We found out that they don't apparently do a really good job of checking references on employees that they hire in Marion County, because our ambulance system director has a whole bunch of very serious charges against him from South Dakota that he lied about when he came to Kansas to get his license, and that the licensing board is probably going to take his license away.
Wow.
That is the type of thing that it's never going to get covered.
Yeah.
And we have people now writing us notes wanting us to investigate things all over the country.
We've got a problem here in southeastern Nevada.
If it's in Marion County, we'll look at it. We care about Marion County, and that's all we care about. And that's actually a benefit, because you need local media that care about local issues. And we don't want to sit there and talk all day about transgender athletes and walls and living wages and whatever. I don't want to get on one side or the other of a critical race theory, whatever else we're going to talk about. We need to talk about, what's going on in the local area. And they're just,
I mean, I've got a reporter friend who's an investigative reporter in Atlanta. He says, I worship at the altar of truth. I seek truth. I reveal truth. I'm not looking for issue the issue. I'm looking for truth.
We are sort of the agents that do that.
Right.
Social media is the agent of somebody has a story they want to tell and they tell it. We don't know whether it's true or not. And then they listen to that story and everybody else agrees or disagrees. Before you know, it doesn't have anything to do with fact anymore.
Right.
It has to do with whether I think this is true or think this is not true. Belief is truth. And that is a very dangerous thing in society. We try to deal in truth and verifiable truth, because there are some truths out there that we can't verify, and we keep working to try to do it.
And going through the journalistic process of being able to verify truth that is impactful to a democracy. I mean, that's kind of the charge of the journalist.
And during one of the scenes, there was about 20 TV crews in our front and a bunch of print people as well. And somebody had a story that day that said that, the people in Marion were, the newspaper's negative all the time. Yeah, we're going to be sometimes. We love positive news. We love negative. What we deal with is surprising news. We aren't going to be there and just reiterate things that everybody already knows. That isn't what people want. And that is what they'll read. They already know the things that are good. And actually, you should be happy if the majority of the news is bad news, because it means that the good stuff is so common that you don't have to hear about it in the news as something that's unexpected. But we do hear bad and we do hear good. And a lot of people seem to think that they want to live in this cocoon, like a Facebook cocoon. And trust me, this is Marion County. It's Facebook. They've never heard it. One of the reporters asked me to do something on TikTok, and I said, that's great. I can do something nobody in Marion County will ever hear. They don't, they're still Facebook, and they live in this little world that nobody's ever challenged. I mean, I did a story in Milwaukee. One of the last things I did was about the Oklahoma City bombing. And at that time, this is pre-internet, there were bulletin board systems that these sort of ultra anarchist types that blew up the federal building. And one of the serious problems is that if that's what you hear, that's the little echo chamber you exist in, you stop hearing that other people think it's wrong to blow up federal buildings. You stop worrying about, But don't you know that there's a daycare center in there and you're going to kill a bunch of kids if you blow up the federal building? Well, they don't even hear that because there's no challenging viewpoint out there. Living in a cocoon is dangerous.
Yeah. I want to take some questions. If folks have questions, what questions do we have? Keaton, hold on. I got to get the microphone to you. Let's. I know, right? Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Hi, good to see you. Hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Okay, so I don't know how much you can tell us, but what is the next step that you guys do about, I mean, not fighting back, but kind of like, what do you guys do? I mean, they illegally did some horrible things to you.
Well, one of our reporters, the one whose desk is that you saw them, has already filed a federal lawsuit against them. The second reporter is planning to do so shortly. We are planning to do so, and I personally am planning to do so. So there will be at least 4 lawsuits that they're going to face. And we're going to do, if anything, it's taught me that maybe I was too cautious in not reporting the problems with the chief. And not having that, you know, a couple of people said, well, you already had 2 sources saying this. And I said, well, but they were sources that were related. We were playing it a little bit careful here. And if anything, what they've done trying to stamp us out, they've made us a little more determined.
Galvanized a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent question. So we'll see as that plays through the courts. Isaac, did you have a question?
So like during the whole process of getting raided, I mean, not that you have anything to hide, but were you scared at all? Like just, I mean, there's cops breaking in and all this going on.
I wasn't, but I wasn't, and I'll tell you, you're so busy doing this stuff that you don't have time to react. I mean, my people have said, you know, your mother died talking to you the next day and you'd been her caregiver for, have you grieved and all. I really haven't had time to do it. Now, I will say that our reporters, the cops came in through the back door at the newspaper office, and we've never locked the back door except when we leave. They've now taken to locking the back door, so they're a little worried about that. And one of them lives in Wichita and drives up, and she had a tail light out on her car. And she had to switch it with her husband and was afraid to drive in Marion County without a tail light for fear that somebody'd pull her over, make it believe like there was some big thing going on and put a gun in her hand and shoot her. So I don't know what, but she had a lot of fear about that. But, you know, we're the safest people in the world right now. They can't, I could go spit on their face and I do anything
Which you
about
wouldn't
it.
do, right?
I wouldn't do
Which
it.
you wouldn't do it.
I wouldn't do it.
And this is not anti-authority or anti-cop or anything like that. The goal here is to play by the rules, right?
Yeah.
There are laws and regulations, and the First
Exactly.
Amendment gives the press is the only job in the Constitution that is guaranteed to be free. I mean, and so that becomes something big in that way. Other questions for Eric? Where we got going over here? Who here? Where? Oh, hi.
Okay, so I have to confess that I am from Marion County. I'm from Peabody, and Peabody Gazette is also published by the Marion County Record. And when Eric came and started writing editorials, it was a big deal because I would read these and I would typically giggle. It's like, this is coming from Marion County. This is coming from our conservative little county. And I actually have one that I carry around with me quite often. One of my favorite ones is, America is all about personal rights. Each of us, unless we're threatening, can throw our arms around as much as we want, but that right extends only to the tip of someone else's nose. And that was when he wrote September 15th of 2021, talking about wearing face masks and getting vaccinated because, surprise, surprise, Marion County was not big on getting vaccinations and face masks. But one thing I was going to ask, I read the paper yesterday, the Gazette, or I'm sorry, the Record.
And they're all the same right now.
I know.
Since COVID, we've merged them together, but we still maintain them as separate entries, post office.
But when you were talking about how the mayor has done nothing about suspending or doing anything with that police chief, that he's still on duty, still doing exactly what he always has wanted to do. That really shocked me that nothing's been done. And talking about the vice mayor, she was the only one who ever made sense on the city commission. So
Yeah.
I'm not surprised they targeted her, but it's great to meet you and thank you. And I apologize, condolences to you about your mother.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The reaction in Marion is considerably different. She's mentioning Peabody. There was a situation in Peabody where the mayor of Peabody made an announcement that he wanted the police chief to do anything and everything, didn't care whether it was legal or not, to combat drugs. Police chief and the entire police force quit, and then the mayor quit because of that. Because it was, there's still people who care about the rule of law and following proper things. I do not know why the Marion police chief has not been suspended. Suspending someone with pay, which is also called vacation, is not a punishment. It's designed to reassure the public that someone isn't doing something improper or that we're going to investigate it. But the mayor has decided that this is what he's doing. Honestly, you really want to go back, and if she's been reading our paper, she knows what we're talking about here. This is a mayor who routinely intensely berates the vice mayor. If you look at old videos, you would think that you're watching Joe McCarthy. Did you or did you not say this, that, and it goes on by hour and hour. This is a tradition in Marion that another person from Peabody, who's a former mayor of Marion, the Marion City Council has long been misogynistic, and there's a lot of things that go on in this that we're trying to address, but it takes time. And this is maybe my advantage of having lived in Andrew's world here, where things in universities take a lot of time to change, and we just have to be patient. Eventually, this stuff comes around, but it is God's work. I mean, it is a noble thing that people go. Now, for those of you out there whose parents are saying, "Oh my God, don't go into journalism. You're going to get paid crap and you're going to have terrible working hours and all the rest of that," and everything they've said is true. But you're going to feel good about it. You're going to feel like you did something that didn't involve, finagling to get some corporation some more money somewhere. You actually did something for the good of society. And that's what drives the people who work in this field. It's like a mission. It's like people who become teachers or social workers or other things. It is a mission. If you feel that that's the mission for you, go for it. There's still a chance to do this. There are still lots of newspapers like ours around that, one of them that comes to mind right away in Kansas is the Iowa Register. Really good newspaper. They beat us out for the sweepstakes award this year in our category. And I know all of them and all the rest of that. And there's a bunch of others. There's also some really bad ones, but that's true of anything.
Well, we're about out of time. I just Eric, want to thank you and tell you that the A.Q. Miller School certainly supports everything you're doing.
Appreciate
and that we support journalism in all its forms, and particularly the First Amendment. Thank you for standing tall where some may crumble. And we certainly appreciate you coming and talking to all these budding journalists here today. Let's give a round of applause to Eric here as he can. Thank you to everyone who joined on Zoom as well, and anyone watching the recording, and we certainly appreciate it. Eric will be around here for another 10 or 12 minutes before we go to something else if you have another question.